Here's today's First Word Daily Devotion.
On the last day of February, we turn our attention to Leviticus chapter 17 and chapter 18. And let's notice something right away. In Leviticus chapter 17, we notice in verse 4 this language of imputation. Look at this, how rich and theological our understanding of the Old Testament is. And does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to offer it as a gift to the Lord in front of the tabernacle of the Lord. Here's the language: blood guilt shall be imputed to that man. Now, what is imputation? What does it mean for something to be imputed? Imputed is the reception of something external to you. In other words, you receive something from the actions of another, or on account of something that was done externally to you. And in this case, it's negative. It's a negative imputation of blood guilt. But in our case, those of us who have the imputed righteousness of Jesus Christ, in our case, it's a positive reception. In other words, in the negative case is that they're guilty by association. But in our case, the positive case is that we are forgiven also by association because we are in Christ. Pay attention as well. The reason blood has to be shed for atonement is because of what we have here in chapter 17 and verse 14. For the life of every creature is in its blood, and its blood is its life. In other words, life for life. Now look at chapter 18. Chapter 18 talks clearly about family matters, and we need to make this point clear, especially in our culture and society today. The Lord cares about the family. He has prescribed the way for us to walk with Him in love and diligence. He has prescribed the way of life, and that is, He tells us that He cares about the family. But notice the way that He tells us about the family. He begins this section by a reiteration of what He's called us to. And remember this, there's a lot of details in the book of Leviticus. Sometimes we think that those details have nothing to do with us. But those details are important because it gives us a picture of the life that God is calling us to, this life of holiness. And remember, He never changes. Now, that doesn't mean that a lot of this stuff has already been fulfilled. Some of these regulations are no longer binding to us. We understand those things because of Jesus. However, the principles of morality always stand because Christ never changes. God never changes. Look at chapter 18. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You shall not do as they do in the land of Egypt, where you lived. You shall not do as they do in the land of Canaan, to which I am bringing you. You shall not walk in their statutes." And so, in other words, He is reminding them that they are a holy people separated to Him. We can put that in our context and remember that we are not to fold into the mold of our society. We are to remind them, just as our steeples in our churches point north, point up, point towards the heavens. We are to remind our society of a better world that is coming, and a better world indeed that is already broken through the cross by the Spirit. Look at this language. You shall follow my rules and keep my statutes and walk in them. I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my rules. If a person does them, he shall live by them. I am the Lord. And then He goes through these details as it relates to how we treat our family, and especially as it relates to sexual relations, which are so important, that most intimate of human expressions. The details of that is laid out for us in chapter 18. Look how 18 concludes, verse 30. So keep my charge never to practice any of these abominable customs that were practiced before you, and never to make yourself unclean by them. Why? Because I am the Lord your God. Now let's turn our attention to Psalm 55, and I want to call your attention to verse 22. Look at this language. Cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. Now let's flip back to Mark chapter 6 and notice what the Lord prescribes here first. The apostles returned to Jesus and told Him all that they had done and taught. And look at what He says to them. And He said to them, "Come away by yourself to a desolate place and rest for a while." Remember this, Jesus is our rest. Even though He calls us to work for Him, even though He calls us to work diligently for Him, our minds are always to be searching for ways to serve the Lord. But remember this, prescribe yourself rest in this year. I hope that as you're thinking about all the plans that you want to accomplish, and here we are at February the 28th, maybe some of your goals have fallen off. Maybe you're a little upset at yourself. Maybe that project is still waiting. The dust has collected on whatever project it is. Remember this, in all of your turmoil and all of your wondering and spinning, the Lord prescribes rest, and make sure that you rest. And that doesn't necessarily mean just a work from your hands. It also means a work of your heart. If you have burdens this morning, you can rest in the fact that God will sustain you. And the way that He does that is by feeding you, as He did with these 5,000 here in the book of Mark, feeding you with bread that satisfies. And He Himself is the bread that satisfies forever. And so let Him be your satisfaction today. Rest in Him. He has accomplished salvation. Righteousness is imputed, given to you. You are free by association.